Mr. President, I would like to discuss the state of play on Benghazi. I think Senator Boxer came onto the floor this morning and talked about the investigations and all the things that have been done to find out about what happened in Benghazi. Number one, to those serving in Libya today, you're definitely in our thoughts and prayers. My advice to the administration is get those folks out as quick as you can, because this thing is going downhill very quickly in Libya. So let's don't have another Benghazi on our hands. I feel like the security environment in Libya is deteriorating as I speak. So let me, if I can, set the stage for my concerns. One, I think most people on this side of the aisle, right or wrong, believe if the names were changed, this whole attitude toward finding out what happened in Benghazi would be different. If it had been the Bush administration, Condoleezza Rice, not Susan Rice, that we would be really on fire as a nation to find out how the president could have said 2 weeks after the attack, mentioned a video as the cause of the attack, that all the information coming from the intelligence community to the White House and others, there was never a protest. That if Secretary Rice had gotten on the national news, or Mr. Hadley, or John Bolton, the UN ambassador, U.S. ambassador in the United States, had gotten on television 5 days after the attack and told a story about the level of security. We believe it was a protest caused by video, not a coordinated terrorist attack. If that had all been said by the Bush people, there would have been definitely a different approach about this issue. And that, to me, is very sad. You may not agree with that observation, but almost everybody over here, I think, believes that. And Mr. Zucker today, I know him from CNN, fine man, said he wouldn't be bullied into covering the Select Committee. Nobody's asking any outlet to be bullied. But I've got some questions I want CNN to answer, or somebody that would answer questions that I think are very relevant. So what's the state of play? As far as the Senate goes, we've had the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence issue a report on January 15, 2014. I think they did a very good job covering their lane. They did not have jurisdiction over the State Department, so their report was limited. There was a minority report inside the report by Republicans taking some issue with some of the findings, but the bottom line was the Senate Intel Committee, in a bipartisan fashion, looked at Benghazi and said it could have been prevented. So that's something to be positive about. Now, the Armed Services Committee, they have done nothing. We haven't issued any report. This is the report in the Armed Services Committee in the Senate looking at DOD's responsibility that night. The Foreign Relations Committee, this is their report, nothing, looking at the State Department's behavior that night. We've had hearings, but the relevant committees have not issued reports. The Homeland Security Committee, in December 30th, 2012, Senator Lieberman and Collins did a good job talking about the Homeland Security role in Benghazi, a very good report, but a lot has happened since then. So I want people in the country to know, and in the Senate, the reason I want a select committee in the Senate, we're not the House. Two of the committees, very relevant to oversight of Benghazi, haven't issued any report. The Armed Services Committee has done nothing, nor has the Foreign Relations Committee, and I think this is worthy of our time. This is a bipartisan report issued in 2008 by the Armed Services Committee about detainee abuse. I participated in this report during the Bush administration. We had some serious system breakdowns when it came to detainees in U.S. custody. Senator McCain and myself worked with Democrats to issue this report. I thought that was important to get to the bottom of system failure in the Bush administration, but I would argue that 4 dead Americans are worthy of a report, and we have not had one. So there's a lot of things that could be done, should be done in the Senate that have not been done. So what would I like to find out about Benghazi that we do not know? This is the Accountability Review Board, an internal investigation by the State Department. 2 fine men led this investigation, appointed by Secretary Clinton. This thing has more holes in it than Swiss cheese. They missed a lot. They didn't talk to Clinton or Rice, Secretary Clinton or Ambassador Rice. In this report, they talk about the reason that Ambassador Stevens was in Benghazi is that they were looking at closing the consulate in Benghazi in December. I finally got to talk to one survivor after about 18 months of trying, And I found from that survivor, the person in charge of security at Benghazi on the night of the attack, that they had renewed the lease on the consulate in July for a year. So that makes no sense. The report says he went down there to look at closing up the place, and they just renewed the lease in July before he goes down in September. So not by any means an exhaustive review of Benghazi. This is a statement I read out on September the 10th, 2012, the day before the attack. This is a readout of the President's meeting with senior administration officials on our preparedness and security posture on the 11th anniversary of September the 11th. Apparently, the President has a meeting in the White House, I assume, with all of our national security folks to talk about what we can expect on September the 11th, because it was the 11th anniversary of 9/11. During the briefing today, the President and the principals discussed specific measures we're taking in the homeland to prevent 9/11 related attacks, as well as steps taken to protect U.S. persons and facilities abroad, as well as force protection. I've got one simple question. Did they bring up Libya? Did they talk about the security situation in Benghazi and Libya? If not, why not? Because based on this statement, it's a reassuring statement to the American people that the President and his team are on top of this. Well, they were not on top of it when it came to Libya. So I want to find out, did that meeting have any discussions about the death trap called Benghazi? This is the security situation in Benghazi pre-9/11. March 28th, there was a request for additional security, which was denied. Our security footprint was very light. We had an agreement with a militia in Benghazi that was supposed to be our primary reaction team, Libyan militia, that proved to be less than reliable. On April the 6th, an IED was thrown over the fence of the U.S. post in Benghazi. Did the President know about this? Did Secretary Clinton know about it? I assume they did, but nobody in any of these investigations has ever told us if the President was aware of this. On June 6th, a large IED destroys part of the security perimeter of the U.S. post in Benghazi, leaving a hole big enough for 40 men to go through. They commission a study or some kind of review. Where is it at? It's been attacked in April and June. Did the President know about these attacks? They blow a hole in the wall large enough for 40 people to go through. On June 11th, 5 days later, the British ambassador's motorcade is attacked very close to the Benghazi facility, our facility, and U.S. personnel go help the British ambassador. After this attack, the British closed their consulate in Benghazi. Why did we leave ours open? On July the 9th, request from Ambassador Stevens for additional security. No response. July the 11th, Lieutenant General Neller sends emails to Undersecretary Kennedy offering additional security. Kennedy responds saying no additional DOD support is needed. There's a 16-person Special Forces National Guard team that was ready to volunteer for an extra year to help our folks in Benghazi, and State Department said no thanks. August the 6th, the International Red Cross had been attacked 4 times. They finally close up and leave town on August the 6th. The British leave, the Red Cross leaves. Lieutenant Colonel Woods was a National Guard soldier trying to help security, doing a site security team investigation. Instead of being extended and he volunteered to stay for an additional year, he was sent home in August. August 16th, this is the most damning of all. There's a cable that was sent to from Benghazi by our ambassador telling the people in Washington that the consulate could not withstand a coordinated terrorist attack and the Al-Qaeda flag is flying all over town. This is on 16 August, basically begging for additional security, letting people in Washington know that we cannot withstand a coordinated terrorist attack and Al-Qaeda flags are flying all over the place. That's the state of play. That's the background in terms of security regarding the consulate in Benghazi. Let's fast forward. These are statements by the regional security officer who was asking for additional security. He was so frustrated by the response he had received in Washington, he said the following: For me, the Taliban is on the inside of the building. What Eric Nordstrom was talking about is that the people in Washington seem to be completely deaf as to his needs for additional security, and he thought the people in Washington were working against him, and he was very worried about what would happen if there was an attack and believed that one was coming. This is Lieutenant Colonel Wood, the Utah National Guard Special Forces soldier that left in August. Here's what he said. It was instantly recognizable to me that it was a terrorist attack, mainly because of my prior knowledge there. Almost expected the attack to come. We were the last flag flying. It was a matter of time. And this had gone up DOD channels, as well as Department of State. So that's the history of the security situation in Benghazi. Now, to people at CNN, to my Democratic colleagues, to anybody and everybody, please explain to me how on the 16th of September, 5 days after the attack, Susan Rice, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was chosen to appear on 5 Sunday talk shows to talk about the attack in Benghazi and on other facilities. But I can assure you, she was very worried about what was going to happen, the questions regarding Benghazi, because that's where we had 4 people killed. Here's what she said about the level of security, 16 September. Well, first of all, we had a substantial security presence with our personnel and the consulate in Benghazi. I've got a question. Who told her that? Nothing could have been further from the truth. When you look at the history of the security footprint in Benghazi, it was begging and pleading by the people in Libya to have more help, and everything was denied. It was to the point that the person in charge of security felt like the Taliban were inside of the building here in Washington, and Lieutenant Colonel Wood said it's just a matter of time. We were the last flag flying, and on 16 August, before the September 11th attack, you get a cable going back from the ambassador, Chris Stevens, to Washington saying we cannot defend this compound against a coordinated terrorist attack. Those are the facts. Here's what Susan Rice told the world. Well, first of all, we had a substantial security presence with our personnel in the consulate in Benghazi. I got a simple question. Who told her that? Who briefed her about security in Benghazi? Because the person who told her that needs to be fired, because they're completely incompetent or they lied to her. If she made this up, she needs to resign, because nothing could have been further from the truth. And if she just made this up to make the administration look good in light of all the other evidence about security, then she's not an honest person when it comes to conveying national security incidents. So please, after all these investigations, after all these hearings, can somebody tell me where Susan Rice got this information from? How could she conclude, based on what we know now, that we had a substantial security presence with our personnel and the consulate in Benghazi? She went further to say, well, we obviously did have a strong security presence. She said this on ABC, this on Fox. If you listened to her on 16 September, you would believe we were well prepared for this attack and we had secured the consulate in a reasonable fashion. If anybody had looked at the actual record, the information available to our own government in our own files, you could not have said that, honestly. I'm sure this was a good thing to say 6 weeks before an election. The problem is it's not remotely connected to the truth. And to this day, nobody can answer my question, where did she receive information about the security level in Benghazi? Because she's never been interviewed by anybody 20 months later. Why was she chosen? If John Bolton had taken Condoleezza Rice's place to talk about a consulate not under his control but under her control, people would want to know, where was the Secretary of State? Now, Ambassador Rice was the UN ambassador, United States ambassador to the United Nations. She had no responsibility for consulate security. The person responsible for consulate security and our footprint in Libya was Secretary Clinton. I've always wondered why they chose her. To this day, no one's answered that question. But here's what Susan Rice said, 12/13/2012. Secretary Clinton had originally been asked by most of the networks to go on. She had an incredibly grueling week dealing with the protests around the Middle East and North Africa. I was asked, I was willing to do so. It wasn't what I had planned for that weekend originally, but I don't regret doing that. And she further said she had no regrets about what she told the American people. Okay, I asked for 5 more if I could.
Is there objection?
Am I into your time? Yeah, you're next. Okay. 1 minute. Okay, to be continued. I can't do this justice in 15 minutes, but here's what I'm suggesting. If it's true that the Secretary of State could not go on television to talk about a consulate under her control and tell us about how 4 Americans died at that consulate, the first ambassador in 33 years, because she had a grueling week. If that's true, and I don't really believe it is, but if it is, we need to know, because that will matter to the country as we go forward. If it's not true, why would Susan Rice say it? To be continued. There's so much about this incident called Benghazi that we don't know that makes no sense to me. I'm not going to give up until I can tell the families what I believe to be the truth, and what I've been told is nowhere near the truth. With that, I yield.